Her hand shot out and grabbed his collar. Before Ethan Carter could speak, before he could think, before he could do anything at all, she kissed him. Hard. Right there, in front of 200 of Chicago's wealthiest people. He was a maintenance worker making $18 an hour. She was Victoria Sterling, CEO of a $2 billion company, and she had just made him her fake husband. But here's what nobody in that ballroom knew. This desperate kiss wasn't about love. It was about survival, because somewhere in that crowd, a monster was watching. And he would stop at nothing to destroy them both. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The alarm clock read 5:43 a.m. Ethan Carter opened his eyes 2 minutes before the buzzer would shatter what passed for sleep. He'd trained himself to do this years ago. Those extra seconds mattered. They gave him time to remember where he was, why he was alone, why the other side of the bed stayed cold. 2 minutes to build the armor that would carry him through another day. He silenced the alarm before it could sound. The apartment was quiet except for Chicago waking up around him. Traffic building below, the ancient heating system clanking to life. Ethan sat up, feet finding the cold floor. He allowed himself exactly 30 seconds of stillness. 30 seconds where he didn't have to be the provider, the protector, the single father holding together a life that had shattered 3 years ago. A drunk driver. A red light, steel crumpling, glass shattering. And Sarah, his wife, his best friend, stopped breathing before the ambulance arrived. She was 8 months pregnant with their second baby. 30 seconds. That was all he got. Then he stood and walked to the bathroom, careful to be quiet. His daughter Lily was still sleeping and she needed every minute of rest before Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at 6:15. The mirror showed a man who looked older than 32. Brown hair that needed cutting. Stubble that would have to wait. 3 jobs. That was what it took to keep them afloat. Mornings at the Regency Crown Hotel. $18 an hour. Afternoons driving delivery routes. $14.50 an hour. Evenings picking up catering work when he could get it. $42,000 a year. $180,000 in debt from Sarah's medical bills and funeral costs. The math never worked, but Lily had food, clothes, a roof over her head. That was all that mattered. He got dressed in his maintenance uniform. Navy blue. Hotel logo over the heart. Steel-toed boots stretched into their 18th month. In the kitchen he started coffee and checked his phone. Text from his delivery supervisor. Someone called in sick. Can you add an extra route today? Ethan calculated. 4 more hours. $60 after taxes. Mrs. Rodriguez could keep Lily until 8. $60 was a week of groceries. He texted back confirming he'd take the shift. Lily's bedroom door was decorated with construction paper drawings, flowers, hearts, stick figures representing their family. Ethan paused outside listening to her breathe. That sound had kept him tethered to sanity after Sarah died. When grief whispered that maybe survival wasn't worth the effort. He opened the door quietly. Lily slept buried under blankets clutching her stuffed elephant. The one Sarah had bought when they found out they were having a girl. Back when their biggest worry was nursery colors. Ethan left her sleeping and prepared her lunch. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, juice box. He wrote a note on a napkin. Lilybug, you're the bravest girl I know. Love, Daddy. The notes were ritual. 8 months now. Ever since he found the box of notes Sarah had written for Lily before she died. His notes weren't as good as Sarah's, but he wrote them anyway. At 6:13 a.m., Mrs. Rodriguez knocked. She was 71, retired teacher, living alone since her husband died 6 years ago. She'd started watching Lily when Ethan's previous childcare fell through. Temporary became permanent. Permanent became family. Mijo. Her voice was soft. You look terrible. Are you sleeping? Working. Same thing these days. Not the same thing. Sleeping is what you do at night, so you don't collapse. I'll take a day off when they start paying me enough to afford it. She made a disapproving sound, but moved toward Lily's room. Ethan followed. watched as Mrs. Rodriguez gently woke his daughter. Lily's eyes opened slowly, confused, then focusing. Then her expression shifted to something that made Ethan's chest ache. "Is today the day Mommy comes back?" She asked this twice a week, despite every gentle explanation. Mrs. Rodriguez glanced at Ethan with sympathy. "Today is Tuesday, mija. On Tuesdays we have pancakes. Then the library. Remember books about cats." The redirection worked. Lily climbed out of bed and let Mrs. Rodriguez guide her toward getting dressed. Ethan stood in the doorway, feeling like he'd failed at another piece of parenting Sarah would have handled better. He left at 6:28 a.m. The commute took 43 minutes when trains ran on schedule. They usually didn't. The Regency Crown Hotel occupied 12 floors of downtown Chicago real estate. Glass and steel. $700 per night for rooms Ethan could fit his entire apartment inside. He entered through the service entrance, the pathway designed to keep staff invisible to guests. His manager Kevin was in the break room, balding, stressed, reviewing work orders. "Carter, good timing. Presidential suite. Guest complaining about shower pressure. Not hot enough, not enough volume. They said it feels weak. Get it done before 8. Day manager's on edge about the Christmas gala." The Christmas gala. Tonight. Annual event where wealthy people congratulated themselves on charitable donations while drinking champagne worth more than Ethan earned in a day. He took his tool bag and headed up. The guest wasn't in the suite, probably at breakfast spending $30 on eggs. Ethan fixed the non-problem in 8 minutes. The next 6 hours passed in familiar rhythm. Broken ice machine, just needed the filter replaced. Clogged toilet in room 412, professional discretion required. Light fixture in the conference room, 20 minutes. Bulb that cost $14 and would be billed at $75. Ethan moved through the hotel like a ghost, present but unnoticed. A woman in designer clothes held the elevator door for him once, smiled with careful politeness that acknowledged he was human, but preferred not to think about the economic gulf between them. A businessman complained about hallway noise, then walked away mid-conversation when his phone rang. Being invisible was survival strategy. Lunch was 15 minutes in the break room. Sandwich he'd packed, scrolling through his phone. Texts from Mrs. Rodriguez. Lily had eaten lunch, currently napping. Bank account hovering just above overdraft. At 1:47 p.m., Kevin found him. "Carter, I need a favor. Night shift called out sick. Cover the Christmas gala tonight. 6 to 2 a.m., time and a half." Ethan calculated. 8 hours at $27 an hour. $216 before taxes. But it meant calling Mrs. Rodriguez, canceling the delivery route, another day running on no sleep. "I'll take it." Kevin's relief was visible. "Mostly just be available. Keep service elevators running. Should be easy money." Easy money. That was what managers said about shifts that were never easy. Ethan called Mrs. Rodriguez. "Of course I'll keep Lily overnight, mijo. Don't worry." "I'm sorry. I keep asking. You keep providing for your daughter. Nothing to apologize for." The delivery supervisor was less understanding. Reliability matters for contractors who want to keep getting shifts. Ethan listened to the lecture while counting 216 versus 60 lost. Math mattered more than pride. It won't happen again. They both knew it would. At 5:47 p.m., Ethan stood near the service corridor entrance in the transformed ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white, centerpieces costing more than his monthly rent, string quartet playing something classical. He didn't belong here except as invisible support staff. The event coordinator had briefed them. Remain unseen, respond immediately, never interrupt networking guests. Easy money. So far just standing around waiting for emergencies that hadn't materialized. He watched Chicago's elite arrive. Old money with casual confidence. New money working harder to look wealthy. Corporate executives. Young professionals trying to network their way up. Then she arrived at 7:04 p.m. Tall. Blonde hair in elegant style. Black dress with tailoring that cost thousands. She moved with confidence, knowing exactly who she was. No hesitation as she entered and began greeting people with practiced ease. Ethan watched her circulate, spending exactly the right amount of time with each group, laughing at appropriate moments, touching arms with familiarity that suggested intimacy without crossing boundaries. This was a woman who'd weaponized charm, who understood business happened in rooms like this. She paused near the windows, accepted champagne from a server who appeared with perfect timing. For a moment, her composure slipped, exhaustion visible in her dropping shoulders. Then she saw something across the room. Her entire body went rigid. Ethan followed her gaze. A man in expensive suit stood near the entrance, scanning the crowd. Late 30s. Silver hair at temples. Confidence that felt performative. Ethan watched her reaction, hand tightening on champagne glass, breathing changing, eyes searching for exits with subtle desperation. This wasn't uncomfortable acquaintance. This was fear. She turned and walked toward the service corridor, quick but not obvious, retreating while trying not to appear like retreat. Then she ducked behind the column where Ethan stood. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought. Early 30s, breathing rapid, controlled panic she was fighting to suppress. When she looked up at him, her eyes showed something Ethan recognized from his own reflection after Sarah died. Terror. Absolute terror. Her hand shot out and grabbed his collar. "Pretend to be my husband. Right now." Ethan opened his mouth, and she kissed him. Hard. The ballroom didn't fall silent. Conversations continued. Music played. But in Ethan's awareness, everything stopped. 5 seconds. Maybe. Felt like an hour. When she pulled back, her hand still gripped his collar. He could feel her trembling. Full body shaking. Across the room, the silver-haired man stood frozen. Face draining of color. Expression cycling through shock to disbelief to something darker. Possessive rage. "Come with me." She pulled Ethan toward the service corridor. He followed. Because his brain hadn't caught up. Because she clearly needed help. Because instinct from emergency response training was screaming this required action. The corridor was concrete and fluorescent lights. She released his collar and leaned against the wall, breathing like she'd run a marathon. What the hell was that? She pressed palms against her eyes. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I saw him and panicked." "Saw who?" "My ex-fiancé. He's been following me for months. When I saw him, I needed to do something he wouldn't expect." She lowered her hands, eyes red-rimmed. "So you kissed a complete stranger?" "Yes. I know it's insane. But you were there. And..." She paused. "You've been kind to me before." "What?" "3 weeks ago. Parking garage. You held the elevator, didn't stare at me, just stood quietly, then nodded and disappeared." Ethan had vague memory of holding an elevator. Automatic politeness. "That kiss wasn't for the crowd." Her voice cracked. "It was for me. If I'd frozen, Marcus would have known I'm scared. I can't let him win." Ethan recognized the edge she was standing on. He'd stood there himself. Hospital corridor when doctors said Sarah wouldn't survive. Funeral home choosing a casket. Dark hours when grief whispered survival wasn't worth it. She was spiraling, breathing faster, hands trembling harder. He kept his voice calm. "Hey, look at me." She did, fighting to stay present. "You're having a panic attack. Normal given what happened. But you're safe right now. Marcus is in the ballroom. You're here with me." "You don't understand. He's been destroying everything I've built for 6 months." 10 minutes. Ethan interrupted. "Give yourself 10 minutes to breathe. Then handle whatever you need to handle." She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. "I don't have 10 minutes. Meridian Holdings executives are arriving. In 10 minutes you can be composed. Right now you're 5 seconds from falling apart, which makes better impression." The logic penetrated. She took a shuddering breath. 10 minutes. Then you go out there and convince whoever needs convincing that you're exactly as competent as you are. Something flickered in her expression, surprise that this stranger understood what she needed. She straightened, the CEO sliding back into place like armor. "What's your name?" "Ethan Carter." "I'm Victoria Sterling." She extended her hand like they were at a business function instead of a service corridor after her panic attack. "Thank you for helping, for not asking questions." Ethan shook her hand. Questions would just complicate this. They would. Victoria managed a tired smile. "I need to ask you something. You should probably say no. It's insane and inappropriate." Ethan had a feeling where this was going. Every rational part screamed to extract himself before this became whatever mess she was about to propose. But he couldn't walk away from someone drowning. "What happens after 10 minutes? "I go back out and face him. But if I'm alone, he'll see weakness. Use tonight against me with the board. Suggest I'm not stable enough to run Sterling Capital." She paused, calculating. "But if I walk out with someone, if Marcus sees I've moved on, it changes the dynamic." "You want me to stand next to you while you talk to these Meridian people?" "Yes. Tonight. Maybe the next few days. Until contracts are signed." Insane. Ethan had Lily at Mrs. Rodriguez's. Delivery shifts tomorrow. A carefully balanced life that didn't include pretending to be a billionaire's husband. But he knew what it felt like to face worst moments alone. "I'm a maintenance worker. I don't know anything about your world. I'll mess this up." Victoria's expression shifted. Hope breaking through desperation. "You already saved me once tonight." Ethan thought about Lily's question from last week. "Daddy, if someone needs help, are we supposed to help them?" He'd said yes. "Keep your money." "What?" "If I do this, I'm not doing it for a paycheck." "Then why?" "Because 3 years ago a nurse held his hand and told him he didn't have to face the worst night alone. Because Lily asked about helping people, and Ethan wanted to tell her yes. Because nobody should deal with this alone. Because sometimes people need help." Victoria's eyes went bright with tears. She blinked back. "Okay. Just stand next to me. Let Marcus see I'm not frozen." They stepped back into the ballroom. Her hand slid into his elbow. Fingers digging in with pressure, communicating how much control she was exerting. Heads turned. Whispers rippled. Wealthy people processing Victoria Sterling with a maintenance worker. They crossed toward the windows where a group surrounded an older couple radiating casual wealth. Marcus stood on the periphery, eyes tracking their approach with predatory focus. Up close, he looked exactly like the kind of man Ethan had learned to distrust. Too polished. Smiling with his mouth while his eyes calculated. His voice was smooth. "Victoria, I didn't realize you'd be bringing a guest." Victoria's grip tightened. "Marcus, I didn't realize you'd be here at all." "Meridian Holdings invited me personally. They value my insights on Sterling Capital's strategic direction." Casual threat, delivered with a smile. "How interesting you're suddenly concerned about my business relationships." Not sudden at all. Victoria matched his false warmth. "I've always been concerned about people who undermine Sterling Capital." Marcus's gaze slid to Ethan, dismissive and cruel. "Though I see your taste in companions hasn't improved." Something shifted in Ethan. Protective instinct overriding trained invisibility. He extended his hand. "Ethan Carter, Victoria's husband." The word dropped like a stone into still water. Nearby guests went silent. Marcus's face cycled through expressions. Shock, disbelief, rage, forced control. "Husband." He repeated it like a foreign concept. I don't recall hearing about a wedding. We've been married about a year. Ethan glanced at Victoria. She nodded slightly. Small ceremony, very private. How convenient. No one knew. No records. We didn't need announcements. Ethan kept his voice level. Some things are worth keeping between people who matter. The older couple, Meridian Holdings executives, stared openly. The woman smiled at Victoria, raised her champagne in small congratulation. It was working. Marcus looked like someone had rearranged his chessboard. Victoria's voice carried just enough warmth. Excuse us, Marcus. We should say hello to Richard and Patricia. They missed our ceremony. She guided Ethan away, leaving Marcus with an expression that promised consequences. They crossed the ballroom toward the older couple, and Ethan felt every step like walking through deep water. Victoria's hand remained locked on his elbow, her nails digging crescents into his skin through the fabric of his uniform. Richard Chen extended his hand first. Firm grip, assessing eyes. Victoria, we've been hearing interesting things tonight. Richard, Patricia. Victoria's voice was steady now, controlled. I'd like you to meet my husband, Ethan Carter. Patricia Chen smiled warmly. It's lovely to meet you, Ethan. Victoria has been keeping you quite the secret. We prefer privacy, Ethan said, especially given how public Victoria's professional life is. Richard nodded like this made perfect sense. Quite right. The business press can be invasive. Though I'm surprised Thomas never mentioned Victoria had married. He and I play golf twice a month. Victoria's grip tightened further on Ethan's arm. My father and I have a complicated relationship regarding my personal life. He had expectations about who I should marry that didn't align with my choices. Patricia made a sympathetic sound. Family expectations can be difficult, but ultimately, you have to live your own life. They talked for another 10 minutes. Easy conversation about holidays. Chicago weather. The Meridian. Holdings partnership. Ethan said as little as possible, letting Victoria carry the discussion while he stood beside her, projecting whatever version of supportive husband seemed appropriate. Marcus kept his distance through the rest of the evening, but Ethan could feel him watching, calculating, adjusting whatever strategy he'd had before encountering this new information. At 11:17 p.m., Victoria's composure finally cracked. Ethan felt it in the way her hand started shaking against his elbow, the way her breathing changed, the subtle shift from controlled performance to someone who'd been performing too long. He leaned close enough that his voice wouldn't carry. Service corridor, now. She didn't argue, just let him guide her away from the ballroom. The corridor was empty. Victoria put her back against the concrete wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor. Her $4,000 dress pooled around her. She didn't seem to care. I can't believe I just did that. Her voice was hollow, shock setting in as adrenaline faded. I kissed a stranger, lied to everyone, told Richard and Patricia you're my husband when you're... She gestured vaguely at his uniform. When I'm what? Ethan kept his voice gentle. A maintenance worker. That's what I am. If that's a problem, you should have thought about it before you kissed me in front of 200 people. Victoria laughed. Broken sound that was half sob. The worst part is it worked. Did you see Marcus's face? He didn't expect it, couldn't process it, and Richard and Patricia actually seemed happy for me. Ethan filled a paper cup with water from the corridor fountain, brought it back, and pressed it into her hands. What happens now? He asked. Marcus is going to investigate me. He's going to figure out I'm not actually your husband. Then whatever you accomplish tonight falls apart. Then I'll tell him it's none of his business. Victoria's voice was bitter. That my personal life is exactly that, personal. That whether you and I are legally married or just together, it doesn't change anything about my competence to run Sterling Capital. Except he'll use it against you. Tell the board you're lying to investors. Probably. Victoria took a shaky breath. Which is why I need to ask you for more than 10 minutes. Ethan had known this was coming. Hearing it still made his stomach drop. How much more? The Meridian Holdings partnership is contingent on board approval. My board is split between members who trust me and members who think Marcus might be right about my judgment. She looked up at him, eyes showing exactly how much it cost her to ask for help. If I walk back into Sterling Capital on Monday alone, if they see that Marcus rattled me tonight, they'll start second-guessing everything. But if you walk in there with me, if they see I'm stable, that I've moved on, it changes the narrative. You're asking me to keep pretending to be your husband? Yes, not forever. Just until the Meridian contracts are signed. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Ethan thought about Lily, about his 3 jobs, about the carefully balanced life that didn't include elaborate deceptions with billionaire CEOs. I have a 4-year-old daughter. I work 3 jobs. My life is complicated in ways that don't fit into your world. I know. Victoria's voice cracked. And I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm asking you to let me into it temporarily. We can figure out logistics. I'll make sure Lily's comfortable. Whatever you need. What I need is for my life to make sense again. I know. But that ship sailed the moment I kissed you. Ethan thought about the nurse who'd held his hand 3 years ago. About Lily's questions about helping people. About all the small moments when someone had helped him survive the worst. 2 weeks. Until your contracts are signed. Then we figure out how to end this without destroying whatever you've accomplished. Thank you. Victoria's voice cracked again. Thank you, Ethan. I know this is insane. Yeah, it is. They sat in the service corridor while the gala continued without them. 2 strangers who'd just agreed to construct an elaborate lie. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Marcus appeared. He stopped when he saw them sitting together. Ethan's hand resting on Victoria's shoulder in a gesture that could be read as supportive or intimate. Victoria. His voice was cold, controlled. We need to talk. Ethan stood, positioned himself between Marcus and Victoria. I think my wife has made it clear she's done talking to you for tonight. This doesn't concern you. Everything that concerns my wife concerns me. Marcus's face went through expressions he was clearly trying to control. You have no idea what you've walked into. This woman is manipulating you, using you, and when she's done, she'll discard you like everything else she doesn't need. Victoria stood, composure rebuilt enough to face him directly. That's rich coming from the man who spent our engagement positioning himself to take over my company. Victoria, go home, Marcus. You've done enough damage for one night. This isn't over. Yes, it is. It's been over since I called off our wedding 8 months ago. You just haven't accepted it yet. Marcus looked between them, calculating, recognizing that whatever strategy he'd planned had failed spectacularly. We'll see what the board thinks about your new husband. I'm sure they'll have questions about when this marriage happened and why nobody knew about it. Let them ask. Unlike you, I don't owe the board explanations about my personal life. Marcus walked away without responding. Victoria turned to Ethan. For the first time since kissing him in front of 200 people, she smiled with something approaching genuine warmth. You just called me your wife to Marcus's face. You started it by kissing me. I figured I'd commit to the bit. You're very good at committing. Most people would have run away screaming by now. Most people didn't spend 3 years learning that running away from hard situations doesn't make them less hard. Victoria studied him. You're not what I expected when I grabbed you tonight. What did you expect? Someone who'd say yes to money. Someone who'd treat this like a transaction. Someone who wouldn't understand why I'm fighting so hard. And instead you got a maintenance worker with a dead wife and a 4-year-old daughter who said yes because people should help when they can. Yeah. Victoria's voice went soft. Instead, I got you. Ethan left the Regency Crown at 12:47 a.m. The train ride home was empty. Just him and a handful of other overnight workers. He stared at his reflection in the dark window and tried to process what he'd agreed to. 2 weeks of pretending to be married to a billionaire CEO. 2 weeks of lying to people who could make or break her career. 2 weeks of hoping Marcus wouldn't dig too deep. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. "Thank you again for tonight. My lawyer will call you tomorrow morning to discuss details." Ethan typed back, "Make sure your lawyer calls after 8 a.m. Lily wakes up early, and I don't want to explain Daddy's new fake wife before breakfast." Victoria's response came immediately. "Noted. And for what it's worth, you're good at this. The husband performance. Very convincing. Years of practice pretending I'm holding it together. Turns out the skills transfer. That's depressingly relatable. Get some sleep, Ethan. Tomorrow's going to be complicated." He arrived at his apartment at 1:34 a.m. Mrs. Rodriguez was asleep in his armchair, knitting project in her lap, television playing some telenovela on low volume. He woke her gently, apologized for keeping her so late, tried to pay her $50. She waved away the money. "Mijo, you don't pay family. Lily's fine. She went to bed at 8. No nightmares tonight." "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to tell you something." She studied his face with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look like someone who just made a decision that's either brilliant or catastrophic and won't know which for several days. What did you do?" "I agreed to help someone, but it's complicated. It's going to involve changes to my schedule for the next few weeks." "Changes like what?" "Changes like I might need you to watch Lily more often. Changes like there might be people asking questions about me." Mrs. Rodriguez stood, gathering her knitting. "This person you're helping, are they taking advantage of your goodness?" "She's not. She's desperate and I was available. Sometimes that's how life works." "Sometimes desperation makes people do things they regret. Just be careful, mijo." After she left, Ethan checked on Lily. She was sleeping peacefully, clutching her elephant. He stood in her doorway, watching her breathe. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something that wasn't just exhaustion and grief. He felt purpose. It probably would end badly. But Cameron had stopped believing in good endings 3 years ago. If he was going to make catastrophic decisions, at least this one involved helping someone. He fell asleep at 2:16 a.m., thinking about the way Victoria had said "together," like maybe she'd been fighting alone for so long that having an ally meant more than she could articulate. Ethan woke to 17 missed calls, and his phone vibrating with notifications that had been accumulating since 6:23 a.m. The alarm clock showed 7:04. He'd overslept by an hour and 21 minutes. Lily was probably awake and wondering where breakfast was. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through the avalanche. Text from Kevin at the Regency Crown, asking if he'd seen the news. 3 voicemails from numbers he didn't recognize. Email from Victoria's lawyer with subject line, "Urgent Media Response Strategy." And a news alert from the Chicago Tribune with a headline that made his stomach drop. Sterling Capital CEO's mystery husband revealed at charity gala. Below the headline was a photograph from last night. Ethan in his maintenance uniform. Victoria in her $4,000 dress. The moment right after she kissed him. The article was speculation disguised as journalism. Phrases like "unconfirmed reports" and "sources close to Sterling Capital" and "questions remain about the timeline." But the core narrative was clear. Victoria Sterling had apparently been secretly married for over a year to a man nobody in Chicago's business community had ever heard of. His phone rang. Unknown number, Chicago area code. He answered before thinking better of it. Victoria's voice came through tight with controlled panic. "Have you seen it? Just woke up to 17 alerts, so yes. My PR team is drafting a statement, but they need information from you. Work history, education, anything that makes you look like a reasonable choice instead of random maintenance worker I picked up at a hotel." "Victoria, I am a random maintenance worker. There's no PR spin that changes that." Then we emphasize the human interest angle. You're a single father working 3 jobs to provide for your daughter. That's sympathetic. That's the kind of story that makes people root for you instead of judging me. The phrase, judging me, landed wrong, carrying implications about how Victoria's world viewed people like Ethan. He pushed down the irritation. She was panicking. Panic made people say things they didn't mean. What do you need from me? My lawyer Jennifer Chen is coming to your apartment in 45 minutes. She'll interview you, go over our story, prepare you for questions. 45 minutes. Tell your lawyer not to look too shocked by the neighborhood. Ethan. Victoria's voice went softer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry this exploded faster than we expected. Save the apology for when this is over and we can evaluate whether it was worth it. He hung up and found Mrs. Rodriguez standing with spatula in hand. She'd clearly heard enough. Mijo, you want to tell me why a lawyer is coming here in 45 minutes? Ethan sat down at the table accepting the coffee she poured. Remember when I said I was helping someone and it was complicated? I remember. It got more complicated, and I can't explain all of it. But for the next few weeks people might be asking questions about me and Lily. Mrs. Rodriguez studied him. This woman you're helping. Is she the blonde from the newspaper photo? You saw the photo. Everyone saw the photo, mijo. It's on 3 different news sites. Your face is very clear. She sat down. So yes, I saw the photo of you kissing some rich woman in evening gown while wearing your work uniform. And now her lawyer is coming here. Her name is Victoria Sterling. She runs a company. Her ex-fiancé has been stalking her and trying to destroy her career. Last night she panicked when she saw him and she asked me to pretend to be her husband. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyebrows went up. And you said yes to this insanity. I said yes because she looked like I felt 3 years ago in that hospital. Like she was drowning and needed someone to throw her a line. Mijo. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression softened. Your heart is too big for your common sense. This woman is going to complicate your life in ways you haven't thought through. Probably. But I already said yes. And now there are photos and articles. I can't exactly call the newspaper and tell them it was all a misunderstanding. Just promise me you'll protect Lily first, before you protect this stranger who kissed you at a party. Lily's always first. That's not negotiable. Jennifer Chen arrived at exactly 8:47 a.m. Mid-40s, Chinese American. Wearing a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had survived decades of legal battles. She shook his hand with professionally firm grip. Mr. Carter, thank you for meetings on such short notice. I know this situation has escalated quickly. Ethan showed her to the kitchen table. Lily had moved to the living room with Mrs. Rodriguez, both pretending to watch cartoons while clearly trying to eavesdrop. Jennifer pulled out a tablet and documents. I'm going to ask you questions. Some will feel invasive. All are necessary. If we're going to construct a believable narrative, I need truth first, so I can figure out what parts we emphasize. Emphasize. That's a nice word for lying. We're not lying, Mr. Carter. We're strategically presenting facts. Jennifer's voice carried practiced neutrality. Now, Victoria said you met approximately a year ago. Is that accurate? No. I met her last night when she grabbed my collar and kissed me in front of 200 people. Jennifer didn't even blink. But you had encountered her previously. Parking garage 3 weeks ago. You held an elevator door. I hold elevator doors for lots of people. It's called courtesy. Good. So we can say you first encountered each other 3 weeks ago. Had subsequent interactions. Developed connection that led to relationship. Jennifer typed something. When would you say the relationship became serious? Ethan stared at her. There is no relationship. This is elaborate fiction Victoria created because she was panicking about her stalker ex-fiancé. Mr. Carter, I understand you're trying to be honest, but honesty in this situation is liability. Jennifer set down her tablet. Here's reality. That photograph is on every business news site in Chicago. Marcus Ashford is currently calling board members telling them Victoria has been lying about her personal life. If we don't construct believable timeline, the board will question her judgment. The Meridian Holdings partnership collapses. She paused. We need you to commit to this narrative completely, or we end this arrangement now before more damage is done. Ethan thought about Victoria's face last night. The terror in her eyes when she'd seen Marcus. How he'd already said yes and backing out now would leave her worse off. What do you need me to say? Relief flickered across Jennifer's professional composure. Tell me about your work history, education, family background, anything that explains who you are beyond maintenance worker. For 40 minutes, Ethan walked Jennifer through his life. High school graduation, but no college. Sarah got pregnant senior year. They decided to get married instead of pursuing degrees they couldn't afford. Emergency response training through a community program because Ethan was good in crisis situations. 5 years on a rescue team before Sarah died, and he quit because he couldn't handle the pressure anymore. 3 jobs now. $42,000 a year. $180,000 in debt. 2-bedroom apartment. Lily in state-subsidized preschool. Mrs. Rodriguez as unpaid childcare. Jennifer typed everything without judgment. The rescue team training is good. We can emphasize that. Makes you sound more capable. She scrolled through notes. The deceased wife is sympathetic, but we need to be careful not to make it sound like Victoria is rebound. How long ago did she die? 3 years, and her name was Rachel, not the deceased wife. Of course, I apologize. Jennifer's voice softened marginally. 3 years is appropriate grieving period. We can work with that timeline. They spent another hour constructing the narrative. Ethan and Victoria met professionally. He'd been doing maintenance work at a conference where she was speaking. They'd encountered each other multiple times over subsequent months, started talking, discovered unexpected connection despite economic differences. Relationship developed slowly, neither rushing. Cameron had Lily to consider. Victoria had her career. They got married at courthouse 11 months ago. Small ceremony, just immediate family. Victoria wanted privacy after the disaster with Marcus. Ethan was supportive of her career, understanding that being CEO required discretion about personal life. They maintained separate residences initially because Lily needed stability. It was believable because it hid enough truth, and flexible enough that they could adjust details when questions arose. Jennifer closed her tablet at 10:34 a.m. You're very good at this. Most people struggle to maintain consistent narrative under pressure. You answered every question without hesitation. I spent 3 years learning to lie about being okay when I wasn't. Turns out the skills transfer. Victoria said something similar. Jennifer packed her briefcase. She said you understood what it meant to perform stability while drowning inside. Ethan didn't respond. What happens now? Now we prepare for Marcus to attack. He will absolutely investigate you. Employment history, finances, your late wife, everything. Jennifer paused. But based on what you've told me, the worst he'll find is that you're a working-class man dealing with tragic loss while raising daughter alone. That narrative makes Victoria look more human rather than less competent. Unless the board thinks she's so desperate she married the first person who showed her kindness. Then we emphasize that you pursued her, that you saw past the CEO to the woman underneath. Jennifer stood. Mr. Carter, I know this seems insane, but Victoria wouldn't have asked for help if she wasn't truly desperate. Marcus has been systematically destroying her for 6 months. She needs this partnership to succeed, or she loses everything. After Jennifer left, Ethan sat staring at the documents she'd left behind. Bullet points of their fake relationship. Timeline of moments that never happened. Photograph of him and Victoria from last night with caption, Love Finds a Way, Sterling CEO's Surprise Marriage. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with coffee he hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. She sat down across from him. This is going to change everything. Your quiet life, your careful invisibility. Once people know who you are, you can't go back to being anonymous maintenance worker. I know. And this woman, Victoria, she's asking you to risk a lot for her. What's she risking for you? Ethan hadn't thought about it that way. Victoria had recruited him for a role that served her needs, promised to make sure Lily was comfortable, offered compensation he'd refused. But Mrs. Rodriguez was right. Victoria wasn't actually risking anything. If this arrangement collapsed, she'd just return to being CEO with complicated personal life. Ethan would be the one whose face was in newspapers, whose daughter's privacy had been violated, whose life had been permanently altered. I already said yes, so either I commit completely or I back out now and leave her worse off than when we started. Sometimes the brave thing isn't helping. Sometimes it's recognizing when you're being used and walking away before you get hurt. And sometimes people are drowning, and you're the only one close enough to throw them a line. Maybe you both drown, but at least you tried. Mrs. Rodriguez sighed. Just promise me you'll protect Lily first. Lily's always first. But even as Ethan said it, he wondered how he'd protect Lily from media attention that was already spinning their lives into narrative neither of them controlled. The photograph showed his face clearly. Any competent journalist could find his address, his employment records, his daughter's preschool. Privacy was already gone. The only question was whether what they gained would be worth what they lost. The media explosion accelerated through the weekend. By Saturday morning, Ethan's story had spread beyond Chicago business publications into national news sites that loved narratives about class-crossing romance. Headlines got progressively more absurd. Cinderella story in reverse billionaire CEO marries maintenance worker. Love knows no tax bracket, Sterling Capital's secret wedding. From service elevator to boardroom. How one man won Chicago's Ice Queen. Ethan's phone filled with requests for interviews. Good Morning America wanted them on Monday. People magazine offered 5 figures for exclusive wedding photos that didn't exist. TMZ camped outside his apartment building until security threatened to call police. Victoria called Saturday afternoon. Pack a bag. You and Lily are moving into my place until this dies down. We're not moving anywhere. This is temporary crisis management. We maintain separate lives and just appear together when necessary. That was the plan before TMZ started harassing your neighbors. Before someone leaked Lily's preschool location to gossip sites. Victoria's voice hardened. Ethan, there are photographers outside Lily's school. They're taking pictures of 4-year-olds hoping to identify which one is your daughter. Ethan's protective instincts activated immediately. How did they find her school? Public records. Enrollment information that's technically protected but accessible to anyone with moderate research skills. Victoria paused. My building has security, controlled access, underground parking. Lily will be safer here than at your apartment where any reporter can bribe the front desk. You're asking me to move my daughter into a stranger's home after knowing you for 48 hours. I'm asking you to let me protect the child of the man I supposedly married. Because if reporters get photographs of Lily crying because strangers are following her, the sympathy narrative falls apart, and you become the father who exposed his daughter to media circus. Ethan wanted to argue, but Victoria's logic was unassailable. He'd already pulled Lily from preschool Friday after the first photographer showed up. Mrs. Rodriguez was fielding calls from neighbors. Every time he looked out his window, people with cameras were waiting. 1 week. We try it for 1 week. If Lily's uncomfortable, we figure out something else. Agreed. I'll send a car at 6 p.m. The car that arrived was a black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows. The driver loaded their bags with professional efficiency, his expression carefully neutral about transporting a maintenance worker and 4-year-old to his employer's penthouse. Lily was fascinated by the car, chattering about leather seats and bottled water and television screens. Ethan watched his daughter's excitement and felt complicated mix of pride and anxiety. This kind of luxury was temporary gift that would make returning to normal life even harder when this ended. Victoria's building occupied the top 15 floors of a tower overlooking Lake Michigan. The lobby was marble and glass and abstract art. The elevator required keycard access and played jazz music. Victoria's penthouse was the entire 41st floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, open floor plan. Kitchen with appliances Ethan didn't recognize. Furniture that looked uncomfortable and expensive. Victoria met them at the elevator, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost what Ethan earned in a week. Hair tied back, no makeup. Looking younger and more approachable than the CEO he'd met at the gala. She knelt down immediately when she saw Lily. "Hi, you must be Lily. I'm Victoria." Lily ducked behind Ethan's leg, suddenly shy. Ethan rested his hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, Lilybug. Victoria is a friend who's letting us stay here for a little while. Why can't we stay at our home?" The question was reasonable. Ethan didn't have age-appropriate answer. How did you explain to a 4-year-old that reporters were stalking you because Daddy had agreed to pretend to be someone's husband? Victoria spoke before Ethan could formulate response. "Because our home has better toys. And also because I have a very big bathtub with jets that make bubbles. I thought maybe you'd like to try it." Lily's eyes went wide. Bubbles. So many bubbles. Also, I have a room that I thought could be yours while you're staying here. Would you like to see it? Lily looked up at Ethan for permission. He nodded. He watched his daughter take Victoria's hand with tentative trust that made his chest ache. They'd practiced stranger danger extensively. But somehow Victoria had bypassed Lily's caution with simple kindness and promise of bubble baths. Victoria led them down the hallway to a room that had been transformed in the 48 hours since Ethan agreed to this arrangement. Walls painted soft purple, Lily's favorite color, which Victoria had somehow known. A bed sized for children. Dresser with drawers labeled. Bookshelf filled with picture books. Toy chest currently empty but clearly expecting to be filled. "I wasn't sure what toys you liked," Victoria said, genuine nervousness in her voice. "So I thought we could go shopping tomorrow and you could pick. But for tonight, maybe we could read some books before bed, if that's okay with your dad." Lily was already pulling books from the shelf. Ethan stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by how much effort Victoria had invested in making his daughter comfortable in space that was temporary fiction. Victoria appeared beside him, voice low. "Too much. It's perfect," which somehow makes this whole situation more complicated. "Welcome to my life for the past 6 months. Everything Marcus does is perfect on surface, while being manipulative underneath. I'm just trying to be actually perfect instead of performatively perfect." Ethan turned to look at her properly. "When was the last time you slept properly?" "About 6 months ago, before Marcus started his campaign." Victoria managed tired smile. "But I'll sleep when the Meridian contracts are signed and my company is secure." That's not sustainable. Neither is working 3 jobs to survive. But here we both are, functioning despite sustainability concerns. She had a point. They stood in the doorway watching Lily arrange books in order of preference, and Ethan realized that whatever had started as desperate deception 2 nights ago was already becoming something more complicated than either of them had intended. Living with Victoria Sterling turned out to be an exercise in contradictions that Ethan couldn't quite reconcile. The penthouse was a museum of wealth. Original artwork on walls. Furniture arranged by professionals who understood negative space. Kitchen with appliances that probably required engineering degrees to operate. But Victoria herself moved through these spaces like someone who'd forgotten how to feel at home. Eating takeout at the counter because the formal dining room felt too empty. Working from the couch because her home office reminded her of meetings she'd rather avoid. Lily adapted faster than Ethan expected. 4-year-old resilience making luxury feel normal within days. She loved the bathtub with jets. The view of the lake from her purple bedroom. The way Victoria would sit on the floor and build block towers without checking her phone every 30 seconds. On their 3rd night, Lily asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Is Miss Victoria going to be my new mommy?" They were sitting at the breakfast counter. Victoria had insisted on calling it breakfast, even though they were eating dinner because the formal dining table felt performative. The question landed in the middle of conversation about what movies Lily liked. Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Expression carefully neutral, clearly monitoring Ethan's reaction before formulating her own. Ethan set down his water glass and chose honesty because lying to Lily about important things never worked. Miss Victoria and I are friends helping each other right now. We're not... He searched for age-appropriate phrasing. We're not making permanent plans yet. We're just figuring things out day by day. Lily absorbed this with the seriousness she brought to important topics. But you like her, right? You smile different when she's here. The observation was accurate and uncomfortable. Ethan had noticed it himself. The way tension he'd been carrying for 3 years eased slightly when Victoria was present. Like having an ally in survival made survival feel less impossible. But acknowledging that felt dangerous when their arrangement was supposed to be temporary fiction. Victoria spoke before Ethan could deflect. I like your dad too, Lily. He's one of the kindest people I've ever met. But being kind to each other doesn't automatically mean we're going to get married for real. Sometimes people are just good friends who help each other through hard times. Daddy said Mommy was his best friend before she became my mommy. Lily's voice went quieter. Do you think Mommy would be mad if Daddy had a new best friend? Ethan felt his throat close. Sarah had been dead for 3 years, but Lily still processed her absence in waves. Moments of clarity about death mixing with childhood magical thinking that maybe if she was good enough, Mommy might come back. I think Mommy would want Daddy to have friends who make him smile. Ethan kept his voice steady. And I think she'd like Miss Victoria because Miss Victoria is kind to you. Mommy always said people who are kind to kids are the best kind of people. Lily nodded, satisfied with this logic, returned to her dinner. Ethan and Victoria exchanged glances that communicated volumes neither of them was ready to voice. They were crossing boundaries faster than intended, constructing emotional intimacy alongside the fake marriage narrative. Neither of them knew how to slow down without hurting the other. The attack came Monday morning. Leaked documents appeared on Chicago Business Journal's website at 6:47 a.m. Ethan woke to Victoria standing in his bedroom doorway, his temporary bedroom, the guest room that had somehow become his space. She held her tablet with an expression mixing fury and resignation. Marcus struck. Employment records, financial history, everything. It's all public now. Ethan sat up, exhaustion making cognition difficult. How bad? Read it yourself. Read it. The article was titled, Sterling CEO's Husband Financial Instability Raises Questions About Judgment. Below the headline was everything Ethan had told Jennifer Chen during their interview, but twisted into narrative that made him sound like opportunist rather than survivor. 3 jobs framed as inability to hold steady employment. Medical debt presented as financial irresponsibility. Sarah's death mentioned but minimized. Life insurance payout characterized as windfall that Ethan had somehow squandered. Photographs accompanied the article. His apartment building looking worse in professional photography than it did in person. His rusted truck in the parking lot. His maintenance uniform from the Regency Crown. The implication was clear. Victoria Sterling had married someone so financially unstable that questions about her judgment were not just reasonable but mandatory. The comment section was predictably vicious. People questioning Ethan's motives, suggesting he'd targeted Victoria deliberately. Speculating about prenuptial agreements and whether Sterling Capital's board should intervene. Ethan read through the article twice, watching his life get dissected and reassembled into a weapon designed to destroy Victoria's credibility. The worst part was that technically everything was accurate. He did work 3 jobs. He did have massive debt. He did live in a 2-bedroom apartment that cost $800 a month. The facts were correct. Only the framing was malicious. Victoria was pacing, energy contained, but barely. Jennifer is drafting a response, but she says anything we say will just draw more attention. Marcus is betting that the best strategy is letting this narrative solidify before we can counter it. So what do we do? We fight back. You give an interview. Tell your side of the story before Marcus can define it for you. Ethan thought about what Jennifer had said, that the worst Marcus would find was working-class struggle and tragic loss. But seeing it weaponized in print made the vulnerability feel different, more exposed than he'd anticipated. What kind of interview? Local news. Someone sympathetic who will ask questions that let you explain rather than defend. We frame this as class prejudice, business elite uncomfortable with CEO marrying outside her economic bracket. Make the story about them judging you rather than about you being opportunist. It was smart strategy, and Ethan hated how calculating it sounded. But Victoria was right. Silence would let Marcus's narrative win. The interview was scheduled for that afternoon. Local NBC affiliate that did human interest pieces alongside news coverage. The reporter was a woman named Sarah Chen, who'd built her career on profiling people who didn't usually get media attention. She arrived at Victoria's penthouse at 3 o'clock with camera crew that was respectfully minimal. Sarah was early 40s, dressed in professional casual. She shook Ethan's hand with genuine warmth that felt different from the transactional politeness he'd experienced from Victoria's lawyer. "Mr. Carter, thank you for agreeing to this interview. I know the past few days have been overwhelming." They sat in Victoria's living room, cameras positioned to capture Ethan with the lake view behind him. Sarah asked her sound technician to check levels, then settled into her chair with notepad. "Let's start simple. Tell me about your wife, Sarah. What was she like?" The question surprised Ethan. Nothing in Marcus's leaked documents had included personal details about Sarah beyond her death. This reporter had clearly done independent research. Ethan took a breath, letting himself remember Sarah in ways that didn't hurt quite as much as they used to. She was a nurse, pediatric ICU. She worked nights mostly. And she'd come home exhausted but still find energy to play with Lily, to make breakfast feel special. Even when we were both running on no sleep. His voice caught. She was the kind of person who made hard things feel manageable just by being present. How did she die? Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. She was 8 months pregnant with our second child. Ethan heard his voice go flat, protective mechanism against grief that was still raw. I was supposed to pick her up from her shift, but I was running late from my delivery route. She decided to drive herself rather than wait. If I'd been on time... He stopped, because finishing the sentence meant voicing the guilt he'd carried for 36 months. Sarah's voice was gentle. That's a lot of weight to carry. Do you blame yourself? Every single day. And Lily, how has she processed losing her mother? Ethan glanced toward the hallway where Lily was playing in her room, Victoria reading to her from picture book about cats. She still asks when mommy's coming home. We've explained death probably 200 times, but 4-year-olds don't process permanence the same way adults do, so I just keep explaining, and hoping eventually it'll stick. That must be exhausting. Parenting is exhausting. Parenting while working 3 jobs to stay afloat is... Ethan searched for adequate descriptor. It's survival mode. You just do what needs doing and try not to think about whether you're doing it well enough. Sarah made note on her pad. The article this morning characterized your employment situation as instability. But from what I understand, you work maintenance at the Regency Crown Drive delivery routes and pick up catering shifts. That's not instability. That's someone working 60+ hours a week to provide for their child. Thank you for recognizing the difference. So when you met Victoria Sterling, how did that happen? The official story says you met professionally about a year ago. Ethan had memorized the timeline Jennifer constructed. But sitting in interview with cameras recording felt different from rehearsing with a lawyer. This was permanent record. We met at a conference where Victoria was speaking. I was doing maintenance work at the venue. We started talking during breaks. Discovered we had more in common than our economic differences suggested. The lies came easier than they should. We both understood what it meant to lose people. Her mother died when she was 19. My wife died 3 years ago. That shared grief created connection that went deeper than what our bank account suggested was possible. And your relationship developed from there. Slowly. Neither of us was rushing into anything. I had Lily to consider. Victoria had her career. But over time we realized we made each other's lives better. That having a partner who understood pressure made pressure more bearable. Sarah leaned forward slightly. The article suggests you're financially motivated, that you saw opportunity and took it. What do you say to people who think you're with Victoria for her money? Ethan let himself feel the anger that question deserved. Let it show on his face. I say they're revealing their own prejudices about class and worth. I work 3 jobs. I provide for my daughter. I pay my bills, even when paying them means choosing between electricity and groceries. If people think I need to marry someone for money, that says more about how they value human dignity than it does about my character. Do you love her, Victoria? The question hit harder than Ethan expected, because he didn't have an answer he was confident about. What he felt for Victoria was complicated. Gratitude for how she treated Lily. Respect for her competence. Growing affection that might be love or might just be proximity. But saying any of that on camera would undermine the narrative. I love that she reads to Lily without being asked. I love that she works 16-hour days and still finds energy to build block towers. I love that she understands what it means to survive loss without letting loss define you. Ethan paused. Whether that's romantic love or deep respect, I'm still figuring out. But I know she matters to me in ways that have nothing to do with her bank account. The interview continued for another 30 minutes. Sarah asking questions that let Ethan explain rather than defend. When she finally called cut, her expression suggested genuine sympathy. That was powerful testimony, Mr. Carter. I think people will see you differently after this airs. The segment ran on evening news at 5 o'clock and was online by 5:17. Ethan watched it from Victoria's couch. Lily cuddled against his side. Victoria sitting in the chair across from them with tablet showing social media reactions in real time. The response was mixed, but trending more positive than the morning's article. Comments praising Ethan's honesty. People sharing their own stories of financial struggle. Parents relating to the exhaustion of working multiple jobs while raising children alone. Not universal approval. Plenty of people still thought Ethan was opportunist, but enough support that the narrative was shifting from gold digger targets CEO to hardworking father finds unexpected love. Victoria looked up from her tablet, expression carrying relief she'd been trying to hide. It's working. The tide's turning. But Ethan barely heard her, because his phone was ringing with number he recognized. Kevin from the Regency Crown, his maintenance supervisor. Kevin's voice was apologetic and resigned simultaneously. Carter, I need you to come in tomorrow morning. HR wants to talk to you. Ethan's stomach dropped. Am I being fired? The official position is that we're discussing your employment status in light of recent media attention. The unofficial position is that management is uncomfortable with maintenance worker who's now married to Sterling Capital CEO doing repairs in hotel where Sterling executives hold business dinners. So yes, I'm being fired. I'm sorry, Ethan. You're good at your job. I'd keep you if it were up to me. But this is coming from above my pay grade. Ethan ended the call and sat staring at his phone. His primary income source had just evaporated. $18 an hour, 40 hours a week, roughly $3,000 monthly before taxes, gone, because helping Victoria had made him too visible to remain anonymous maintenance worker. Victoria was watching him with expression mixing guilt and calculation. What happened? I'm losing my job at the hotel. Apparently being married to you makes me too complicated to employ in service position. I'll make calls. I can pressure them to. No. Ethan's voice was sharper than intended. You've done enough. I agreed to help you knowing there'd be consequences. This is just consequences arriving faster than expected. Ethan, you're losing income because you helped me. Let me fix this. By calling my boss and using your wealth and power to force them to keep employing me. That'll really convince people I'm with you for reasons other than money. Victoria fell silent. They sat in uncomfortable quiet while Lily played with blocks, oblivious to adult problems that would eventually affect her. The Sterling Capital board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. Emergency session called because 3 board members had formally requested discussion of Victoria's recent marriage and its implications for company leadership. Victoria spent Wednesday night preparing presentations about the Meridian Holdings partnership, financial projections demonstrating why the deal was strategically sound, regardless of anyone's opinions about her personal life. Thursday at 8:47 a.m. Victoria's father arrived at the penthouse unannounced. Ethan answered the door because Victoria was in the shower and Lily was watching cartoons. Thomas Sterling was 68, tall like his daughter, silver hair and bearing that suggested decades of commanding rooms full of people afraid to disagree with him. He looked at Ethan with assessment that was both professional and personal, evaluating the man his daughter had supposedly married. "You must be Ethan Carter." "Mr. Sterling, Victoria didn't mention you were stopping by." "That's because I didn't tell her I was coming. We need to talk, man to man, before this situation gets more complicated." Ethan stepped aside and let Thomas enter. Thomas moved through his daughter's penthouse with familiarity, settling into the chair that seemed designated for authority figures having serious conversations. Ethan sat on the couch, maintaining posture that was respectful without being deferential. Thomas studied him with intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "I'm going to be direct because I don't believe in wasting time on diplomatic phrasing. Did you marry my daughter for her money?" "No, sir. I married your daughter because she needed help, and I was in position to provide it." "But you are aware that she's extraordinarily wealthy, that marrying her provides you with financial security you've never had working maintenance jobs." "I'm aware Victoria has resources I don't. But I'm also aware that asking someone to value me based on my character while simultaneously benefiting from their wealth would make me hypocrite. So I haven't touched a penny of her money, and I don't intend to." Thomas's expression shifted slightly, reassessing. "Victoria said you refused payment for helping her, that you're living here but maintaining your own expenses. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir." "Why, most people in your situation would take what they could get." Ethan thought about how to answer honestly without revealing their arrangement was fake. "Because if I take her money, everyone who thinks I'm opportunist gets to be right. And I'd rather struggle financially than prove the people judging me were correct all along." Thomas stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the lake view that probably reminded him of building his empire from nothing. When he turned back, his expression was less hostile, but no less serious. "Marcus has been calling me multiple times a day, telling me Victoria's judgment is compromised, that she's making emotional decisions, that this marriage is evidence she's not fit to run Sterling Capital." He paused. "What do you say to that?" "I say Marcus is a man who tried to take over your daughter's company after you chose her instead of him. And I say his opinion about Victoria's judgment is less about her actual competence and more about him not being able to accept that she's better at running Sterling Capital than he ever was." Strong words from maintenance worker talking about venture capitalist I trained for 15 years. "Respectfully, sir, I don't care what Marcus's credentials are. I care that he's been stalking your daughter for 6 months trying to destroy her career because she refused to marry him. That's not business strategy. That's abuse disguised as concern." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Are you calling me blind for not seeing it?" "I'm saying sometimes people closest to situations can't see what's obvious to outsiders. You trained Marcus, groomed him to marry Victoria and help run your company. It must be hard to accept that the person you invested 15 years developing turned out to be someone who'd weaponize that trust." They stood in silence for a moment, Thomas processing Ethan's words with expression, suggesting he wasn't used to being challenged by people without business degrees and stock portfolios. Finally, Thomas spoke, voice carrying less hostility than when he'd arrived. "Victoria says you're good with Lily, that you're patient father." "I try to be." Sarah was better at it than I am. But I'm learning. My wife died when Victoria was 19. Cancer that we fought for 2 years before accepting we were going to lose. Thomas's voice went quieter. I wasn't good at being both parents afterward, focused on business instead of helping Victoria process her grief. When she told me she was engaged to Marcus, I encouraged it because I thought she needed partner to share burden of running Sterling Capital. He turned to face Ethan directly. But maybe what she actually needed was someone who understood what it meant to lose person who defined your world and still have to keep functioning for people who depend on you. The vulnerability in Thomas's voice was unexpected. Crack in the authoritative facade revealing man who'd made mistakes he couldn't fix. Ethan didn't know how to respond, except with equal honesty. I don't know if I'm that person for Victoria. We're still figuring out what we are to each other. But I know that when she needed help, I was there. And I'll keep being there for as long as she needs me. Thomas studied Ethan for a long moment, then nodded with something that might have been approval. The board meeting is this morning. I'm going to recommend approval of the Meridian Partnership, and I'm going to tell the members who've been questioning Victoria's judgment that her personal life is none of their concern as long as Sterling Capital continues performing at current levels. Thank you, sir. Oh. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because Victoria is my daughter, and I should have been protecting her from Marcus, instead of questioning her decisions. Thomas moved toward the door, then paused. But Ethan, if you hurt her, if you're playing some long game I can't see, I will use every resource I have to destroy you. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir? After Thomas left, Ethan found Victoria standing in the hallway, dressed for the board meeting in suit that probably cost what Ethan used to earn in a month. She'd clearly heard the entire conversation, been waiting to see if Ethan would defend her to her father without her present. You didn't have to do that. Stand up to him. Yes, I did. Someone needed to tell him that Marcus is the problem, not you. Victoria crossed the space between them and pulled Ethan into a hug that was tight enough to communicate emotions she wasn't voicing. He held her, aware that they were blurring lines between fake and real faster than was probably safe. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears she was fighting. Thank you, for everything, for lying to my father just now to protect our story, for defending me when you barely know me. I wasn't lying to your father. Everything I said about defending you from Marcus was true. The marriage might be fake, but my belief that you deserve better than what he's doing to you is real. Victoria stared at him, like he'd said something profound instead of obvious. Then she kissed his cheek. Brief, chaste, completely different from the desperate kiss that had started this entire situation, and left for the board meeting that would determine whether their gambit had worked. Ethan stood in the empty penthouse for a long moment after Victoria left. Lily was still watching cartoons in the living room, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around her. He walked to the kitchen and started making breakfast. Pancakes, because that was what Lily always wanted. The familiar routine grounding him, while his mind processed everything that had happened. His phone buzzed with text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Saw the interview last night. You did good, mijo. Sarah would be proud of how you're handling this. Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Would Sarah be proud? He wasn't sure. She'd always been the one who could see through complicated situations to the simple truth underneath. She would have known whether helping Victoria was genuine kindness or elaborate self-deception. She would have known whether the feelings developing between them were real or just proximity and shared trauma creating illusion of connection. But Sarah was gone, and Ethan had to figure this out alone. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching her elephant. Daddy, where did Miss Victoria go? She had to go to work, Lilybug, but she'll be back tonight. Will she read me a story when she comes back? I'm sure she will. Lily nodded, satisfied, then climbed onto her chair at the breakfast counter. Daddy, I like it here. Miss Victoria's house is nice. It is nice. Can we stay here forever? The question hit Ethan harder than it should have, because somewhere in the past few days, this temporary arrangement had started feeling less temporary, and that terrified him more than anything Marcus could do. The evidence appeared by accident, the universe demonstrating that sometimes desperation led to preparation that looked like luck. Ethan had been going through papers Victoria had given him about Lily's enrollment at a private school she'd suggested. Forms requiring his financial information that would technically make him guardian on official documents. Mixed in with enrollment forms was a folder labeled Sterling Capital Executive Compensation Review. He'd opened it, thinking Victoria had accidentally included work documents with papers meant for him. What he found instead made his hands start shaking. The folder contained financial records that shouldn't have existed outside secure servers. Shell companies, offshore accounts, wire transfers showing Marcus Ashford had been systematically embezzling from Sterling Capital for 4 years. $53 million moved through entities designed to hide ownership, partnerships that existed only on paper, investment funds that had no actual investors beyond Marcus himself. Ethan stared at the documents. The transfers had started small. $200,000 here, $500,000 there. Amounts that would get lost in Sterling Capital's billion-dollar annual revenue. But they'd accelerated after Victoria became CEO. Marcus apparently escalating theft while simultaneously undermining her leadership. Ethan called Victoria immediately, interrupting her post-board meeting lunch with Meridian Holdings executives. Her voice was distracted when she answered, still in CEO mode. "Ethan, this isn't great timing. I'm in the middle of... You need to see something. Now. It's about Marcus." The tone shift was immediate. Professional polish dropping away. "What did you find?" "Evidence that's going to end his campaign permanently. But we need to secure it before he realizes it exists." Victoria arrived at the penthouse 47 minutes later with Jennifer Chen and 2 associates carrying equipment that looked designed for digital forensics. They spent 3 hours photographing documents, verifying authenticity through cross-referencing with public records, constructing legal case that would survive challenges from expensive defense lawyers. Jennifer's expression was grim satisfaction. "This is federal embezzlement. If these documents are authentic, Marcus is facing decades in prison." "They're real." Victoria's voice was hollow. "I recognize some of these accounts. Marcus used to handle executive compensation reviews before I became CEO. He had access to shell companies we use for legitimate tax optimization. She stopped. Processing. He weaponized that access. How did these documents end up mixed in with Lily's school enrollment forms?" Jennifer's question was sharp, suspicious. "I don't know." Victoria shook her head. "I grabbed a stack of files from my home office. Must have picked up the wrong folder." "That's incredibly fortunate timing." "Or incredibly unfortunate for Marcus." Ethan looked between them. "Does it matter how we found them? The point is we have them. What do we do now?" Jennifer closed her tablet. "Now we verify everything before going public, because if we're wrong, he'll sue for defamation and win." By Friday evening, they'd verified enough documentation to approach federal prosecutors. Jennifer had contacts at the U.S. Attorney's Office who specialized in financial crimes. Saturday morning, 3 FBI agents arrived at the penthouse to interview Victoria about Marcus's access to Sterling Capital's financial systems. They were professional, thorough, asked questions that made clear they were taking the allegations seriously. But they also made clear that investigation would take time. Marcus wouldn't be arrested immediately, which meant he was still out there. Still dangerous. Still capable of anything. Sunday morning, Ethan found out exactly how dangerous. Marcus showed up at 8:23 a.m. He bypassed building security somehow, made it to the 41st floor. Started pounding on Victoria's door while Ethan was making breakfast and Victoria was reading to Lily in the living room. His voice carried through the door. Rage barely controlled beneath volume that suggested he'd been drinking or was having breakdown or both. "I know you have them. Whatever documents you think you found, they're fake. You're trying to frame me because you can't handle that. I've been beating you legitimately." Victoria stood frozen, face draining of color. Lily looked up from her book with expression showing she'd registered the adult fear, even if she didn't understand its cause. Ethan moved toward the door. He pulled out his phone, started recording before opening it, because every instinct from emergency response training said document everything when situations escalated. Marcus was disheveled when the door opened. Suit wrinkled, hair uncombed, eyes carrying manic energy that suggested someone who'd lost control of narrative he thought he'd been managing. He saw Ethan and his rage redirected. "This is your fault. You show up and suddenly she finds documents that have been secure for 4 years. You planted them. You're working with her to destroy me." Ethan kept his phone recording, voice calm in ways that only enraged Marcus further. "No one planted anything, and you need to leave before building security arrives. I will take everything from you." Marcus's voice dropped to something colder than shouting. Threat delivered with precision that suggested he'd been planning this. "Your jobs, your custody, your pathetic excuse for a life. I will make sure everyone knows you're using your daughter to manipulate Victoria, that you're exploiting your dead wife to gain sympathy, that you're—" He stopped himself, but not fast enough. Ethan's expression must have shown something dangerous because Marcus backpedaled, recognizing line he'd just crossed. "I will destroy that little girl." Marcus's voice rose again, control slipping completely. "I will make sure Child Protective Services investigates every aspect of your parenting. I will have her taken away from you. I will—" "Say that again." Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "Still recording. About my daughter. My—" Marcus seemed to realize his mistake. The way rage had made him vocalize threats he'd meant to implement quietly, but the words were already recorded. Every syllable of Marcus threatening a 4-year-old child captured on Ethan's phone. Building security arrived. 2 men who'd been called when Marcus bypassed the front desk. They escorted him out while he continued shouting about fake evidence and conspiracies, voice echoing in the hallway even after the elevator doors closed. Ethan locked the apartment door and turned to find Victoria standing in the living room with Lily pressed against her side. His daughter was crying quietly, scared by shouting she didn't understand. And Victoria was stroking her hair with movements that suggested she'd been comforting crying children her whole life, despite never having any of her own. "Daddy? Who was that man?" Lily's voice was small. "Why was he so mad?" Ethan knelt down, eye level with his daughter. That was someone who made bad choices and is upset about consequences. But he's gone now. Security won't let him come back. You're safe. "He said mean things about you." "Yes, he did. But mean things don't change truth. I'm still your dad. Miss Victoria is still helping us. And that man doesn't get to change anything real just because he's angry." Lily nodded, but clung tighter to Victoria, clearly shaken by adult rage she'd witnessed. Ethan looked up at Victoria over his daughter's head and saw her expression. Something that mixed protective fury with dawning realization that Marcus had just handed them weapon that would end his campaign permanently. "I have it recorded." Ethan kept his voice low. "Every threat, including the one about Lily." Victoria's voice was steady. "Send it to Jennifer immediately, and send a copy to my father, and to every board member who questioned my judgment about Marcus." The recording went viral within hours, because Jennifer strategically leaked it to media outlets that had been covering Victoria's marriage. Audio of Marcus threatening a 4-year-old child while making explicit threats about destroying Ethan's life played on every news station in Chicago by Monday morning. The narrative shifted instantly and completely. Marcus Ashford was no longer concerned board advisor questioning CEO's judgment. He was unhinged ex-fiancé threatening children on camera while simultaneously embezzling millions from company he'd been trusted to protect. The Sterling Capital Board called emergency meeting Monday afternoon. Thomas Sterling formally recommended Victoria's Meridian Holdings partnership be approved unanimously, Every board member who'd questioned her judgment about Ethan issued formal apologies. Marcus was formally removed from all advisory positions. Federal prosecutors announced Tuesday morning they were charging Marcus with wire fraud, embezzlement, and multiple counts of financial crimes, carrying maximum sentences that would keep him incarcerated until he was elderly. Wednesday afternoon, Victoria received confirmation that Meridian Holdings contracts were finalized. $2 billion in committed partnership capital. Sterling Capital stock hit record highs. Business press published think pieces about how Victoria had successfully navigated personal crisis while closing historically significant deal. Wednesday evening, Victoria came home earlier than usual. Ethan was helping Lily with her drawing at the kitchen counter. Crayons spread across the surface. Paper covered with attempts at cats that looked more like purple blobs with whiskers. Victoria set down her bag and stood watching them for a moment. Something in her expression that Ethan couldn't quite read. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Victoria's voice was strange. "Too careful." "Everything actually went right for once. Meridian contracts are signed. Marcus is finished. The board apologized." "Then why do you look like someone just died?" Victoria sat down on the stool across from them. Lily looked up and smiled at her, then returned to her drawing. "Because I just realized what all of that means." Ethan waited. "It means the crisis is over. Marcus is facing federal charges. My position is secure. The contracts are signed." Victoria paused. "It means our arrangement, the fake marriage, the living together, all of it is no longer necessary." The words landed like physical blow. Ethan had known this was coming, had known from the beginning that their arrangement had expiration date. But somewhere in the past 2 weeks, he'd stopped thinking about the ending. "Right." He kept his voice neutral. "The 2 weeks are up. We agreed you'd help me figure out how to exit without destroying what you accomplished. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Victoria's hands were clasped on the counter, knuckles white with tension she was trying to hide. "Jennifer says the cleanest approach is gradual separation. We announce we're taking time apart due to pressures of recent events. After a few months, quiet divorce. No drama, no accusations. Just two people who tried and couldn't make it work. Makes sense. It's the smart play. Protects both of our reputations. Gives Lily stability during transition." "Then why do you look like you're about to cry?" Victoria's carefully constructed composure cracked. "Because I don't want you to leave." The confession hung in the air between them. Lily was still drawing, oblivious to the adult conversation happening over her head. "Victoria, I know this started as desperation. I know I grabbed a stranger and kissed him and asked him to pretend to be my husband because I was panicking. I know none of this was supposed to be real." Her voice was shaking now. "But somewhere in the past 2 weeks it stopped feeling fake. Watching you with Lily. Having someone to come home to who actually sees me instead of just seeing the CEO. Waking up knowing I'm not fighting alone anymore." She looked at him directly, eyes bright with tears she was fighting. "I don't know when it changed. Maybe it was the first night when you called me down in the service corridor. Maybe it was when you stood up to my father. Maybe it was when you protected Lily from Marcus without even thinking about it." Victoria took shaky breath. "But I know that asking you to leave feels wrong in ways I can't explain. And I know that's not fair to you because you never signed up for this. You signed up for 2 weeks of pretending, not for whatever this has become." Ethan was silent for a long moment, processing her words against his own feelings that he'd been refusing to examine too closely. "Lily." He kept his voice gentle. "Can you take your drawing to your room for a few minutes? Miss Victoria and I need to have a grown-up talk." Lily looked between them with expression suggesting she understood more than 4-year-olds were supposed to understand. "Are you going to fight?" "No, Lilybug, we're not going to fight. We just need to talk about something important." Lily gathered her crayons with careful attention, took her drawing and her elephant, walked down the hallway to her purple room. When her door closed, Ethan turned back to Victoria. You're right that I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to help someone who was drowning because I know what drowning feels like, and because I couldn't walk away." Victoria's expression tightened, bracing for rejection. "But you're wrong about one thing." "What?" "You're wrong that asking me to leave is what feels wrong." Ethan stood and walked around the counter until he was standing in front of her. "What feels wrong is the idea of going back to my 2-bedroom apartment and pretending these weeks didn't change everything. What feels wrong is watching Lily ask when she's going to see Miss Victoria again and not having answer. What feels wrong is..." He stopped, searching for words that would make sense of feelings he'd been avoiding. "I spent 3 years surviving, working 3 jobs, raising Lily alone, telling myself that survival was enough, because hoping for more felt like betraying Sarah's memory." Victoria's eyes were locked on his face. "But these 2 weeks watching you read to my daughter, having someone to talk to after she falls asleep, waking up, knowing I'm not carrying everything alone. These have been the first 2 weeks in 3 years where I wasn't just surviving, where I actually felt like I might be learning to live again. Ethan, I'm not saying I know what this is. I'm not saying I'm ready to call it love. But I'm saying that walking away from whatever we're building feels like giving up on something I didn't know I was allowed to want anymore." Victoria stood, close enough that he could see the tears tracking down her face, despite her efforts to hold them back. "So what do we do?" "I think we take it slow. We let Lily adjust. We figure out what this looks like when it's not crisis management. We navigate all the complicated reality that comes when fake marriage ends and real relationship starts." "That sounds terrifying." "Yeah, it does." Ethan managed small smile. "But I've spent 3 years being terrified alone. Being terrified with someone else sounds like improvement." Victoria laughed, broken sound that was half sob. "You're not what I expected when I grabbed you that night." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true. Every time I think I understand who you are, you say something that proves I've only scratched the surface." She reached up and touched his face. Gentle, tentative, like she was afraid he might disappear. "I want to try. The slow thing. The figuring it out thing. Whatever version of us exists after the performance ends. Then we try." Victoria kissed him, not the desperate kiss from the gala that had started everything. Not performance for audience or weapon against Marcus. This was gentle, careful. 2 people who'd found each other in crisis and were choosing to see if they could find each other in calm. When she pulled back, her eyes were still bright with tears, but her expression was different. Hope replacing fear. "We should probably tell Lily. Tell her what that Miss Victoria might be sticking around." Something like that. They found Lily in her purple room, carefully arranging stuffed animals on her bed with the serious attention she gave to important tasks. She looked up when they appeared in her doorway. "Are you done with your grown-up talk?" "We are." Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. Victoria sat on the other side. "And we wanted to tell you something." Lily's expression went worried. "Are we leaving Miss Victoria's house?" "That's actually what we wanted to talk about." Ethan glanced at Victoria, then back at his daughter. "How would you feel about staying here longer?" "How much longer?" "We're not sure yet. We're still figuring things out, but Miss Victoria and I have decided we want to keep spending time together, and that means you and I would keep living here for now." Lily absorbed this with 4-year-old seriousness. "Will Miss Victoria still read me stories?" Victoria answered this one. "Every night if you want." "Will she still take me to get ice cream?" "Whenever your dad says it's okay." Lily considered, then looked at Ethan with expression that seemed older than her years. "Daddy, do you love Miss Victoria?" The question hit Ethan harder than it should have, because he still didn't have confident answer. Because love felt like word that required more certainty than he possessed. But looking at his daughter's earnest face and Victoria's hopeful expression, he realized that maybe certainty wasn't the point. I care about her very much, and I want to spend more time figuring out what we are to each other. Is that okay with you? Lily nodded slowly. Mommy would want you to have someone who makes you smile. You smile more when Miss Victoria is here. The simple observation from a 4-year-old cut through all the complicated adult logic Ethan had been constructing. Sarah would want him to be happy, would want Lily to have a stable home with adults who cared about her, and whatever Victoria and Ethan were building fake marriage turned real connection. It was making both of them smile more than either had smiled in years. You're very smart, Lilybug. I know. Lily returned to arranging her stuffed animals. Conversation apparently concluded to her satisfaction. Victoria caught Ethan's eye, mouthed "thank you" with expression that communicated gratitude she couldn't voice in front of Lily. They left Lily to her important stuffed animal work and walked back to the living room. The city stretched out below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago going about its business, unaware that two strangers who'd met by accident were choosing to see if their accidental connection could become something intentional. That went better than I expected. Victoria's voice was lighter than it had been in weeks. Lily's adaptable. She's had to be. She's amazing. You've raised an incredible kid. Sarah raised her. I'm just trying not to mess up what she started. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something about Sarah? Yeah. Do you think she would have approved of this? Of us? Ethan considered the question seriously, thinking about the woman he'd loved and lost, and what she would have wanted for him. Sarah used to say that love wasn't about finding perfect person. It was about finding person who made you want to be better version of yourself. He looked at Victoria. These past 2 weeks, watching you fight for something you believed in, seeing you be kind to Lily even when you were falling apart, it's made me want to be better than I've been. More present, more hopeful, less afraid. Victoria's eyes went soft. Is that a yes, that she would have approved? I think Sarah would have approved of anyone who made me smile again, and anyone who was patient enough to earn Lily's trust. Then I'll try to keep earning it. They stood together watching the city lights come on as evening settled over Chicago. 2 weeks ago, Ethan had been invisible maintenance worker counting every dollar and praying he could keep his daughter fed and housed. 2 weeks ago, Victoria had been CEO drowning under weight of ex-fiance's campaign to destroy her. Now they were something neither of them had expected to be. Partners in something that wasn't quite definable yet, but which felt more real than anything either of them had experienced in years. So what happens now? Victoria asked. Now we figure out the boring stuff, where I work since I lost my job, how we handle media attention, what we tell people about our relationship. The Meridian partnership means Sterling Capital is stable for next decade. I can actually take time off, delegate more to my executive team. And I can find something that doesn't require 3 jobs to survive. Maybe finish the engineering certification I started years ago. Victoria turned to face him. Whatever you want to do, I'll support it. That's not charity or obligation. That's me wanting the person I'm choosing to be with to have opportunities to be happy. That might take some getting used to, having support. We'll figure it out together. The word "together" landed differently this time. Not the desperate alliance of 2 strangers facing crisis, but the intentional choice of 2 people who'd found each other in storm and decided to see what they could build in calm. Ethan's phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Saw the news about that horrible man getting arrested. Justice exists after all. How are you and Lily doing? He typed back. We're good. Better than good, actually. I'll explain everything soon. Thank you for everything you've done for us. Her response came immediately. Whatever makes you happy, mijo. You deserve it. Ethan looked at Victoria. She was watching him with expression mixing hope and uncertainty, still not quite believing that he'd chosen to stay. Mrs. Rodriguez says I deserve to be happy. She's right. I'm starting to believe that might be true. Victoria smiled. Real smile this time, not the performance she'd been wearing for months. Then let's make sure it stays true. She took his hand. Simple gesture that felt like promise. And Ethan realized that sometimes helping someone for 10 minutes could cascade into something that changed both your lives forever. In ways neither of you could have predicted. In ways that were better than anything you'd allowed yourself to hope for. They took it slow, despite neither of them being particularly good at slow. Ethan moved back to his apartment after the first week. Not because Victoria asked him to, but because he needed to prove to himself that choosing her wasn't about convenience or desperation, or escaping the life he'd built. Victoria protested at first. This is ridiculous. You're paying rent on an apartment you don't need to live in. I need to know this is real. Ethan packed his bag while Lily watched from the doorway with confused expression. I need to know I'm choosing you because I want to, not because your penthouse is nicer than my place. That's the most stubborn thing I've ever heard. You grabbed a stranger and kissed him in front of 200 people because you were panicking. I think we're both capable of stubborn decisions. Victoria couldn't argue with that. So Ethan went back to his 2-bedroom apartment with the ancient heating system and the refrigerator that sounded like it was plotting murder. Lily went with him, though she complained loudly about missing the bubble bath. But Victoria visited 3 times a week. She learned to exist in spaces where furniture wasn't arranged by professionals, where dinner meant whatever Ethan could cook on a budget, where the television was 15 years old and the couch had a spring that poked through the cushion if you sat in the wrong spot. She didn't complain about any of it. The first time she came over, Ethan expected her to look around with barely concealed judgment, the way wealthy people sometimes did when confronted with how the other half lived. Instead, she kicked off her expensive shoes at the door, accepted the beer he offered, and sat on the floor, helping Lily build a tower out of blocks that had been purchased at a thrift store 3 years ago. Your apartment is nice, she said. You don't have to lie. I'm not lying. It's small. The heating sounds like it's dying, but it feels like a home. Victoria looked at him. Your penthouse has never felt like a home. It feels like a hotel I happen to own. That's because you spend all your time at work. That's because I had nothing to come home to. The admission hung in the air between them. Ethan sat down on the couch. The spring poked him immediately. He shifted to the other side. What do you want, Victoria, long term? If you could design your life from scratch, what would it look like? She considered the question seriously. Lily was still building her tower, humming quietly to herself. I want to run Sterling Capital, but I want to run it in a way that doesn't consume every waking hour. I want to come home to people who are happy to see me. She stopped. What? I want what you have with Lily, the morning routines, the bedtime stories, the way she looks at you like you're her whole world. Victoria's voice went quiet. I never thought I wanted children, but watching you with her made me realize I just never met anyone who made parenting look like something I could do. You're good with her. I'm good at playing with her for an afternoon. That's different from being responsible for another human being's entire existence. Not as different as you think. Lily's tower collapsed. She immediately started rebuilding it, unfazed by failure in the way only children could be. What about you? Victoria asked. What do you want? Ethan thought about it. For 3 years, he'd been so focused on survival that he'd stopped thinking about what he actually wanted. Wants were luxury he couldn't afford. Needs were all that mattered. I want Lily to grow up believing the world is good, that people help each other, that hard times don't have to break you. That's about her. What do you want for yourself? I want to stop feeling guilty for surviving when Sarah didn't. I want to wake up one morning and not immediately start calculating how much everything costs. He stopped. What? I want to deserve the way you look at me. Like I'm something more than maintenance worker who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Victoria set down her beer, crossed the room, sat down next to him on the couch. The spring didn't poke her, which seemed unfair. You are more than that. You've always been more than that. The maintenance uniform was just camouflage for someone who was doing extraordinary things for his daughter every single day. That's not extraordinary. That's just parenting. Single parenting while working 3 jobs, while grieving your wife, while keeping a 4-year-old fed and happy and loved. That's extraordinary, Ethan. Most people would have collapsed under half that weight. I almost did collapse, multiple times. But you didn't. You kept going. And now you're sitting on a couch with a spring that's trying to stab you, having honest conversation about the future with a woman who grabbed you at a party and upended your entire life. Ethan laughed despite himself. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous, all of it. The fake marriage, the media circus, Marcus threatening a 4-year-old on camera, none of it should have happened. Victoria took his hand. But I'm glad it did, because otherwise, I never would have met the man who calmed me down in a service corridor and told me to take 10 minutes and then defended me to my father and protected my daughter like she was his own. She's not mine. She could be, eventually, if that's something you wanted. The implication landed heavily. Ethan looked at Victoria, saw the vulnerability she was trying to hide beneath casual phrasing. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm saying that whatever we're building, I want it to be real, not temporary crisis management. Not fake marriage that we're pretending is real. Actual commitment to figuring out what our lives look like together. That's a lot to figure out. I know, and I'm not asking you to figure it all out tonight. I'm just asking you to tell me that you're willing to try. Ethan squeezed her hand. I'm willing to try. 6 months passed. They learned things about each other that crisis hadn't revealed. Victoria had control issues that made delegating impossible. She worked 16-hour days, even after promising to cut back. She forgot to eat when stressed and slept poorly, even when exhausted. Ethan had hypervigilance from 3 years of survival mode. He struggled to accept help even when help was freely offered. He carried guilt about Sarah that therapy was helping but hadn't resolved. They fought about stupid things. Victoria left lights on in every room because she'd never had to think about electricity bills. Ethan got frustrated with her spending money on things Lily didn't need. She has enough toys, he said after Victoria arrived with yet another shopping bag. She doesn't need more. But she wanted the stuffed cat. Did you see her face when she saw it in the store window? Wanting things and needing things are different. If you buy her everything she wants, she'll grow up expecting the world to give her whatever she asks for. And if you never buy her anything, she'll grow up believing she doesn't deserve good things. The argument escalated, voices rising, neither of them willing to back down. Lily appeared in the doorway. Are you fighting? They both stopped. Ethan took a breath, forced his voice to be calm. We're having a disagreement, Lilybug. Grown-ups do that sometimes. It doesn't mean we're angry at each other. Mommy and you used to disagree sometimes. Then you would hug and say sorry. The simple observation cut through the tension. Victoria knelt down to Lily's level. Your daddy and I are still learning how to talk to each other when we disagree. But you're right. We should probably say sorry. She looked up at Ethan. I'm sorry I didn't ask before buying her things. I should have checked with you first. Ethan sighed. I'm sorry I got frustrated. The toys aren't really the issue. He struggled to articulate feelings he hadn't fully processed. I'm still figuring out what it means to have someone who wants to share responsibility for Lily. For 3 years, it was just me. Adjusting to not being alone is harder than I expected. Victoria stood, crossed to him, took his hand. Then we adjust together. We make rules about spending. We communicate before making decisions that affect Lily. We learn to be partners instead of 2 people orbiting the same child. That sounds healthy. I've been in therapy for 6 months. I'm learning to communicate like an adult. Ethan laughed. Same. Turns out years of suppressing grief creates communication issues. Who knew? They hugged. Lily watched with satisfied expression. See? That's what you're supposed to do. You're very wise, Lilybug. I know. They attended family counseling together. Not couples therapy because they weren't sure they qualified as couple yet. But sessions focused on blending their complicated histories into something that might work long-term. Lily had her own therapist, child psychologist who specialized in helping kids process loss and family transitions. After 3 months, Lily stopped asking when Mommy was coming back. Not because she'd forgotten Sarah, but because she'd finally understood that death meant permanent absence. That missing someone didn't mean they could return. It was progress. Painful, necessary progress. Victoria cut her hours at Sterling Capital, delegated more to her executive team, started attending family dinners at her father's house that she'd previously made excuses to avoid. Thomas Sterling remained complicated, too stubborn to apologize for years of prioritizing business over his daughter, too proud to admit he'd been wrong about Marcus, but he was trying. The first time he met Lily, he brought her a stuffed elephant because Victoria had mentioned she collected them. Lily looked at the elephant with critical eye. It's too big. My elephants are small, so they can all fit on my bed. Thomas looked genuinely confused. I can get you a smaller one? No, this one can be the daddy elephant. He can watch over the little ones. The logic made sense only to 4-year-old minds, but Thomas accepted it. He sat on Victoria's living room floor and helped Lily arrange her elephant family in proper hierarchy. The massive billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing following instructions from a child about which stuffed animals should go where. Victoria watched from the kitchen, eyes bright. He was never like that with me, she said quietly to Ethan. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe. Or maybe he was too busy building Sterling Capital to remember that children need attention more than inheritance. You could ask him. I could. But I'm not sure I want to hear the answer. Ethan didn't push. Some conversations required more time. Ethan enrolled in night classes for engineering certification. Sarah had always encouraged him to finish his degree, said he was too smart to spend his life unclogging toilets and replacing light bulbs. He'd never had time before. Now Victoria insisted on covering Lily's childcare so he could attend classes 3 nights a week. She wouldn't take no for an answer. This isn't charity, she said when he protested. This is investment in our future. If we're building life together, I want you to have opportunities that make you happy, not just opportunities that keep you surviving. I don't want to be kept man. You're not. Your partner who's getting support during transition. Same as I would support you if you were sick. Same as you supported me when I was falling apart at the gala. Ethan couldn't argue with that logic. He took the classes, discovered he was good at engineering, that the problem-solving skills he'd developed through years of emergency response and maintenance work translated into academic success he hadn't expected. The instructor told him he had potential. First time in years, someone had seen potential in him beyond his ability to work 3 jobs without dying. Marcus pleaded guilty to federal charges in exchange for reduced sentence, 15 years minimum. His trial would have destroyed Sterling Capital's reputation through association, so prosecutors accepted plea that kept details relatively private. Thomas visited him once in holding, returned looking older than his 68 years. Victoria asked what they'd discussed. He wanted me to know he was sorry, Thomas said, that he never meant for things to go this far, that he truly loved you in his own way. And what did you say? I told him that love doesn't look like stalking, doesn't look like threatening children, doesn't look like embezzling $50 million while systematically destroying the woman you claim to care about. Thomas looked at his daughter. I told him he'd lost any right to speak your name, and that if he ever contacted you again after getting out, I would make sure he regretted it. Dad, I know I failed you. For years I failed you. I chose Marcus over your judgment. I questioned your competence when I should have been protecting you." His voice cracked. "But I'm trying to do better. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if anything I do now can make up for what I didn't do then. But I'm trying." Victoria hugged her father. First time in years, she'd initiated physical contact with him. Thomas held on like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. "I forgive you," Victoria said. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. I love you, Victoria. I should have said it more. Should have shown it better. You're showing it now. That counts for something." 1 year after the gala, Victoria proposed. Not in dramatic fashion, not in expensive restaurant or private jet, or any of the ways billionaires were supposed to propose. She did it on a Sunday afternoon in the park, where Lily had been insisting they take her to feed ducks. They weren't actually ducks. They were geese who were aggressive about bread distribution. But Lily called them ducks, so ducks they were. They were walking back toward Ethan's apartment. Lily holding both their hands in configuration she called building a bridge. Victoria stopped suddenly. "I need to ask you something. You can say no. Most people would probably say no, but I have to ask." Lily looked up with curious expression, suggesting she sensed something important happening. Ethan raised an eyebrow, waiting. Victoria knelt down to Lily's level first. "Lilybug, I need to ask your dad something important, but I wanted to ask you first if it would be okay with you." Lily's eyes went wide. "Are you going to ask if you can be my real mom?" Victoria's composure cracked. "Sort of. I'm going to ask your dad if he wants to marry me. For real this time. Not pretend like we were doing before, actually married, which would mean I'd be in your family permanently, but only if that's okay with you." Lily didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around Victoria with force that nearly knocked her over. "Yes, yes, 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 I want you to be my mom forever." Victoria caught Ethan's eye over Lily's shoulder. He saw the vulnerability there, the terror of being rejected. This wasn't CEO making strategic move. This was woman who'd found family she'd stopped believing existed and was terrified of losing it. "Is that a yes?" Victoria asked him, voice barely a whisper. "That's a yes to all of it. The marriage, the family, the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of building life together." Victoria laughed through tears, pulled Cameron close, kissed him with none of the desperation from the gala 2 years ago. This was kiss that tasted like hope instead of panic, future instead of survival. They were married 6 months later. Ceremony was still small, but significantly less fictional than the courthouse wedding Jennifer Chen had invented. Thomas walked Victoria down the aisle, expression carrying pride he'd never quite managed to show during her childhood. Mrs. Rodriguez stood as Ethan's witness, tissues ready, makeup already ruined from crying before ceremony even started. Lily was flower girl who took her duties very seriously, scattering petals with concentration that made entire audience laugh. She wore purple dress because purple was her favorite color, Victoria had insisted. At the reception, Thomas approached Ethan during the dancing. "You kept your promise. You've been there for her. I'll keep being there for as long as she'll have me. My wife used to say that the measure of a man wasn't what he did when success was easy. It was what he did when survival was hard." Thomas paused. "You survived, and helped her survive simultaneously. That's rare. I'm still figuring out the whole being married to CEO thing. Pretty sure I'm going to mess it up regularly." "Good. Marriage that's too perfect isn't real. Marriage that survives imperfection is worth having." Mrs. Rodriguez found Ethan during a quiet moment. She'd been crying for 3 hours straight. Claimed it was allergies. Nobody believed her. "Mijo, I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done any of this without you. The past 4 years, all the nights you watched Lily, all the mornings you made her breakfast, none of this happens without you. That's what family does. You're not technically family. Family isn't about blood. Family is about who shows up. Mrs. Rodriguez took his hands. Sarah would be so happy for you. You know that, right? I think so. I hope so. She would. She always wanted you to find someone after she was gone. Made me promise to push you toward happiness if you got too stubborn about staying stuck in grief. She made you promise. 2 weeks before she died. Said she knew you'd try to martyr yourself. Said you'd work yourself to death out of guilt if someone didn't remind you that Lily needed a father who was alive and happy, not just alive and surviving. Ethan's throat closed. Sarah had been planning, even at the end, even when she knew she wasn't going to survive. She'd been making sure he'd have support. I wish she could have met Victoria. She's watching Mijo, wherever she is. She's watching and she's glad. Lily appeared, demanding that her father come dance with her, because the music was perfect for spinning. Ethan let his daughter drag him onto the dance floor. He spun her until she was dizzy and giggling. Victoria joined them. The three of them dancing together in configuration that felt like it had always been this way, like the two strangers who'd met at a gala had always been meant to become family. The years that followed were imperfect in the best ways. They moved into Victoria's penthouse permanently, but they kept Ethan's apartment too, used it for storage, for nights when the city felt too big and they wanted somewhere smaller. Ethan finished his engineering certification, got job at a firm that appreciated his practical experience and problem-solving skills. He still worked hard, still worried about money more than he needed to given Victoria's resources. Old habits were difficult to break, but he only worked one job now. Came home at reasonable hours, read Lily bedtime stories every night. Victoria reduced her hours at Sterling Capital to something approaching normal, delegated more, trusted her executive team to handle things she used to insist on controlling. The Meridian Holdings partnership succeeded beyond projections. Sterling Capital stock reached all-time highs. Business press wrote about Victoria's leadership with respect instead of skepticism. They stopped questioning whether she deserved her position, started asking how other companies could learn from her approach. Lily grew up asking questions. When she was 6, she asked why some people had big houses and others had small apartments. When she was 8, she asked why her daddy used to work 3 jobs when other daddies only worked 1. When she was 10, she asked if Victoria had really kissed her father in front of 200 people before they were actually together. They told her the truth about that one. The fake marriage, the media circus, Marcus's threats, the way 2 strangers had found each other in crisis and decided to build something real from something fictional. Lily thought about it for a long time. So you lied to everyone? Yes. Ethan didn't sugarcoat it. We lied because Victoria was in trouble and I wanted to help. It wasn't the right thing to do, but it was the thing we could do in the moment. But it worked out. It did. This time. But lying doesn't always work out. We got lucky. Do you regret it? Victoria answered this one. I regret that I put your father in a position where lying seemed like the only option. I regret that my problems became his problems when he was just trying to do his job. She looked at Ethan. But I don't regret finding him. I don't regret that the worst night of my life led to the best thing that ever happened to me. Lily nodded, satisfied with this answer. I'm glad you kissed him, even if it was weird. It was very weird. The weirdest. But sometimes weird works out. When Lily was 12, she asked if she could start calling Victoria Mom instead of just Victoria. They were having breakfast. Normal Sunday morning. Nothing special happening. But Lily had been thinking about it, processing it the way she processed everything important. I know my real mom is Sarah, and I know she's not coming back. But Victoria's been my mom for 8 years now, and it feels weird calling her by her first name when she's the one who makes my lunches and helps with homework and tells me stories about her mom who died when she was 19. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You can call me whatever feels right. I want to call you Mom, But I don't want to forget about my other mom. Ethan reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. You won't forget about Sarah. Having two moms doesn't mean forgetting either one. It just means you have more people who love you. Lily considered this. Okay, Mom. She looked at Victoria. That feels weird. Good weird or bad weird? Good weird. The kind of weird that works out. Victoria laughed through her tears. Yeah, that's the best kind. Years later, Ethan would think back to the night Victoria had grabbed his collar in desperate panic. He would wonder what would have happened if he'd said no, if he'd extracted himself from the situation and returned to his 3 jobs and his careful invisibility. He'd probably still be working maintenance, still barely surviving, still teaching Lily that life was something to be endured rather than experienced. Instead, he'd said yes to helping someone for 10 minutes, which became 2 weeks, which became a lifetime. A lifetime of waking up next to someone who understood that survival was just the first step toward actually living. A lifetime of watching his daughter grow up with 2 mothers who loved her. A lifetime of discovering that the armor he'd built after Sarah died wasn't protection. It was prison. And Victoria had been the key. Lily grew up asking the question that started everything. Daddy, when people need help, are we supposed to help them? Ethan always said yes. Always. Because he'd learned that sometimes the person you help ends up helping you right back. That sometimes a desperate kiss in front of 200 people leads to a real one that means everything. That sometimes 2 strangers who meet by accident become family on purpose. And that sometimes, not always, but sometimes the universe rewards people who reach out instead of walking away. Ethan Carter had walked into that gala as invisible maintenance worker with nothing to offer but kindness. He walked out as husband, father, and partner to a woman who'd changed his life by accident, and on purpose, and in every way that mattered. That was the truth of it, simple and complicated, painful and beautiful, real. Because love doesn't ask if you're ready, it shows up when you least expect it, and if you're brave enough to reach back, it changes everything.